Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk you through all the numbers and the work that I did on finally finishing off this eyeshadow palette. If you have seen my latest Panda palette update, you know that I recently finally finished this guy off after, how long has it been? 2 years and 4 months, I believe, of working on it. I have to say that, like, when it comes to the eyeshadow part, I did finish everything off, I think towards the end of last year already. But we still had a blush in here that just kept going and going and going and never ended. So I wanted to give you guys the satisfaction of like seeing this all the way through. I'm gonna try and gather all the pictures that I took over the last, like, basically almost 2.5 years. So you can see the little nice montage at the end. But I quickly want to talk some numbers as well. For me, it's even hard to like fully remember like what all the shades were that were in here. Well, some of them, especially the red one, you can still clearly see it was there because it's left a little bit of pigment, and I'm not one to like go clean these things to make them look all nice because I'm gonna throw it out afterwards anyway. But yeah, going through the shades in here, I think first I'm gonna go through like what shades that I finish off first, which gives you a little bit of an idea of like what I gravitate towards. And then we're gonna talk numbers, like the average uses to be able to hit pan or finish something off, and different types of brushes that I may have used if I still remember. So yeah, that. So starting off with the order in which I finished everything off. I would love to point at where these shades were, but I actually don't really know anymore. You guys will see in the montage afterwards for sure. So first off, I had a peach shade that I finished off after 35 uses. Clearly that was one that I already had hit pan in because I cannot imagine finishing off a shade completely in 35 uses otherwise. And that shows. Like the peachy shades, they're just really easy to use. They're basically neutrals, right? So makes sense that that was one of the first ones to go. Then, interestingly, next we had my white shade, which I'm pretty sure was in the top corner right here. So a smaller shade. It took me 150 uses to use that one up, but it was one of the first ones to go, simply because it's one that I use every single day on my brow bone or my inner corner or both. So there is very consistent use. So even though it's a lot of uses, it goes fairly fast anyway. And pretty sure that when I started working on this one, I was still working on the other palette at the same time as well, which is why the colored shades might not have seemed to move as quickly. And of course I'm doing Panda's eyeshadows as well. So 150 uses to use that one off, 49 to hit pan on that one. Then I finished off a pink shade, 87 uses in total to get to the end of that one, 23 uses for me to hit pan. A good few shades in here already have pan on when I started working on it, so I won't have the amount of pan for all of them, but 23 uses for pan, 87 for total finishing. Pink, not really my shade, but it incorporates well enough with certain things. Then we had a green shade. Green is one of my favorite shades. It took me 105 uses to get all the way through that one, 16 for me to hit pan on it. Probably already used it a couple of times before. As you guys know, green is one of my favorite shades to use, so no surprise that that was one of the earlier ones to go as well. Yeah, and like, I'm starting to doubt whether this order is correct at this point. Let's not assume that this is the order they were finished in. I'm fairly certain actually that green was one of the later shades for me to finish, because I knew I was going to be able to finish it easily enough, so I wasn't fully focusing on it as much as some other shades. But yeah. There is a dark red shade that I believe was at the bottom corner right here, which I used a lot as kind of like an outer V transition. Not transition, it's too dark for a transition, but crease shade in general. It took me 81 uses to finish that one off and 9 to hit pan on it. It always helps when you're a little bit more targeted with a brush, of course, to try and get just the outer V. So those are like smaller brushes, but also the fact that I'm using it in my crease means I'm using like a bigger fluffy crease brush, which just tends to pick up a bit more product. Definitely the opposite of that white shade, which I use with like a wider brush, just picking up a little bit because it's white. I know like my skin tone is supposed to be like white, but it's definitely not white. So I had to be careful with that one as well. Then I had a yellow shade, which I had already hit pan in before, 170 uses for me to get through that one. We had the dark gray shade, which was definitely one of the later ones that I finished off, so maybe the order actually is correct. I don't know anymore. The dark gray shade was right here, so that was a really big one, but because most of the shades in here were a bit more like lit shades, really, I could use that one as my outer V and crease shade a fair bit, especially towards the end. I'm pretty sure I had a similar-ish shade that I was working on another palette before I started working on it. So I only started working on it like maybe halfway through the year or something at the very earliest. 159 uses to finish it off, which, considering that this one took me 150 uses, is actually not that much. So the white shade, I should say. 8 uses for me to hit pan. Once again, probably because I had a more targeted brush because I was using it in my outer V. Then we had the blue shade, which I already had pan on. I used that one 91 times before I finished it off. There was already a little bit of pan on that one as well. And the last shade that remained was my red shade. I know that for sure. 97 uses for me to get all the way through that, even though there already was pan. And I think the red shade initially, which is kind of intimidating to me because it was a pretty, well, not full on primary, but it was red and like red. But at a certain point I figured out that if I combined that with my yellow gold pigment from NYX, it would turn in kind of like more of a bronzy shade, which is something that I love to wear, so that made it a lot easier for me to get through. But when you start late, 97 uses are still going to take you quite a while to actually finish everything off towards the end. Yeah, and then of course we have my blush. I know I at some point must have made a note of like when I hit pan, but for some reason I don't have that number anymore. But in total it took me 465 uses to finish off that blush completely, which is a lot. Yeah, and that's why it took me over 2 years to finish this off, because in the meantime I also focused on a few other blushes here and there. I don't think I finished anything off specifically, but definitely was trying to either hit pan or get a certain amount of uses, which took away my focus here as well. But yeah, 2 years and 4 months later, it is done. Let's talk like official numbers. Of course, I've given you the numbers to hit pan, but I had 5 shades in here that I had not hit pan on yet when I started using them, and the ranges of me hitting pan on them are quite like significant. The pan that I hit the quickest was 8 uses for me to hit pan on the dark gray shade, whereas it took me 49 uses to get to pan on the white shade, and that is mainly just different types of brushes, different amounts of products used. The dark gray shade I could go a little bit bigger on because it was a darker shade, but it was not like ridiculously pigmented, so going in with a crease brush or a more targeted smaller brush would just mean that I managed to hit pan on it quite quickly. But then on the white shade I used a wider brush, picked up just a little bit, which made for the 49 uses. On average it took me 21 uses to hit pan on these shades, but yeah, like I said, that was only 5 of them, and the range is so big. I have 49, 23, 16, 9 and 8. It's a bit all over the place, but I guess 21 is an okay assumption for an average usage, because that is a fairly normal like range for me to be hitting pan in most eyeshadows. For finishing things off, of course here, because I already had hit pan on a few shades, these numbers are not fully fair to assume that it takes me that much time to finish off a specific eyeshadow, plus one of them was significantly bigger than the others, of course. But 35 uses on my peach shade, which was the quickest one for me to finish off when it comes to the amount of uses, and 159 on the gray shade, which of course makes sense because it was a bigger shade. But right after that we have 150 uses on that white shade, which once again shows that I did not use a whole lot of that every single time I used it, because that was pretty much half the size of that gray shade, and still it took me almost the same amount of uses to get all the way through it. For those I had an average use of 102 uses to be able to get all the way through, and considering there was one really big shade in there and a few that I hit pan in, I think the average kind of still makes sense for the average like normal eyeshadow in here. Yeah, those are all the numbers. I have enjoyed working with this. It had some like nice variety of shades. Not a palette that I would recommend specifically, because there definitely are way better quality palettes out there right now. This was the brand was Amuse. I've never heard of that brand before. It came through, I think I ordered it through a website when like it was all the rage to get, I don't even know what the name of those websites were anymore, but basically you could get discounted palettes fairly easily, and I was in my buy everything makeup phase, so I ended up with this one as well. But yeah, that is my little summary. So I will put the whole playthrough of me going through this palette, so all the photos for 2 years and 4 months at the end of this, to make sure you guys get that closure, get that satisfaction of seeing this palette go from almost completely full with a few pans, like I said, to finished up, which I did a few weeks ago. Yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys will enjoy that little like walkthrough with the photos, and I'll see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye.